airport, do not. So when you're having a bad day on your flight, be nice to the people in the airport, because while you get paid for your trip, they're not getting paid to help you get on your trip. If you ever get off the airplane with a pilot, thank that pilot for not killing you, because while that pilot's whole life is up in the air, literally and figuratively, he still got to land that plane. Even if he loses everything waiting on this stuff to work itself out, he still got to land that plane. So y'all need to start paying more attention to the people around you that are impacted by the things that are happening around you, because their decisions in their life can immediately impact yours, especially the people that are operating in transportation, because buses, taxis, any service that is receiving some sort of funding from the government, and that if that funding stops, those services depreciate. Waste management, be in New York and they not pick up trash for a couple weeks because they're not getting paid. You start seeing a huge difference in your society. Michael says, watch my left hand while I slap you with my right. That's exactly what the political changes are doing for us right now. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe. If you're coming in from Twitter, because there's a lot of y'all coming in from Twitter, make sure that y'all hit that follow button over there, and then hit that little heart button on the show, wherever that's located at. She said, what about the farmers? Well, farmers are not getting government funding specifically for a lot of things, but any government contracts that impact farmers, any development that is going to be impacted by government contracts, those budgets stop. So if they were building a building and they were getting paid by the U.S. government, they're not getting paid for this particular portion of construction at this time, and that means that the workers don't get the work. That means that the building doesn't get built. But more importantly, the families of the workers that don't get the work don't get fed. And that's another reason why I give you guys so much information about how to budget your money, build a emergency fund, pay your bills 3, 6, 9 months in advance. Put your money in high interest brokerage accounts instead of leaving them into your bank accounts, because if there's extra money for you lying around when stuff like this happens, you won't feel it. But if you are living from paycheck to paycheck and your last paycheck is on the 1st and your next paycheck is on the 31st of March, you're going to feel that, right? Michael says farmers are not subsidized by the government. I don't think so. Well, they're not 100% subsidized by the government, but you also have to think about the farmers are going to get impacted in a different way. So government agents that don't have jobs don't buy food. The people who don't buy food leaves a larger quantity of produce in the store. A larger quantity of produce left in the store, a smaller quantity of produce being ordered. A smaller quantity of produce being ordered, smaller shipments are being made. Smaller shipments being made, less being picked up from the farmer. Less being picked up from the farmer, the more product that the farmer has that doesn't get sold before it goes bad, because it is live objects. It has to be sold in a reasonable period of time. The farmer cannot slow down the crop growth for a shutdown. So whatever happens where people stop spending money, the farmer just takes that as a financial loss. So while no, the government shutdown doesn't directly pay the farmer, the fallout of the shutdown does impact the farmer. Because at this time, either they won't get paid or everyone will get paid. We'll see. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. Some people are going to be getting pissed off. So daycare is affected, food stamps, Social Security, unemployment, and some people's WIC. Not WIC? WIC, because that WIC, TANF, all of that stuff is affected. But it's the other ones, the Medicaid and Medicare ends up being impacted by stuff like this. Government funded. So when people say that the Democrats are idiots, the Democrats put all of these government funds in place, not the Republicans. And when the budget stops for whatever reason, all of the people that make less than $100,000 a year are impacted by that because they are receiving government funds. Can't touch Social Security. Social Security, disability, and veterans benefits were covered until September of 2030. September 30th of 2026. So we're not going to see any hiccups in veterans benefits or Social Security benefits. They announced that last year that they had kicked that can all the way down to the end of the year. So even if there was a hiccup in January, Social Security will not be impacted and veterans benefits will not be impacted for the first half of the year. But if something happened where they did not agree for 12 months, which is highly unlikely, then come October, they would see a hiccup in their benefits. But they worked out some stuff. So we're going to be talking about what's going on. I get my check every month, even if on strike. Well, that's because your benefits are in a different pool of money. So even the Republicans prioritize making sure that the elderly and the veterans get theirs. However, Republicans care less about poor people than they care about big business, and Democrats care more about the disadvantage, even if it's not a fair assessment, than the people who have earned or worked and made more money than everybody else. So, you're going to see certain liberal privileges that come out for the freedom to do whatever you want, that honestly is like what we fought for in our Constitution, to be oppressed by certain things, and then the conservative expectation to be responsible about that freedom coming from the Republican side of things. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on there, but we need both sides. They both have a bad idea somewhere, but they both have a good idea somewhere also. So, but so far they've agreed that the poor people, well, not the poor people, the elderly people should not be negatively impacted while the rich people are arguing with one another. What's a Democratic? A Democratic Party is a Democrat. That's a democracy, uh, where the Republican is the republic. It's hard to describe. But together, these unfunded bills for the Department of Defense, Labor, Health, and Human Services, and the Transportation add up to roughly 3/4 of all annual discretionary spending. 3/4 now, 75%. So we're talking about a base funding level of over $1.6 trillion that is now frozen. Now, remember, I told you guys early on that there was about $1.5 trillion that was signed by Donald Trump. Isn't that like $100 billion gap between 1.5 and 1.6? See that gap right there? That's the shutdown. But we're going to get into this. So to put it into perspective, the entire argument over DHS is just a fraction of the amount. This shutdown isn't just about immigration policies. It's about freezing the financial engine of the United States military, national health programs, and critical infrastructure projects. While everyone's arguing about one department, the majority of the federal government's operating budget has been quietly taken hostage. So this has been a deliberate strategy to create maximum leverage by hitting the maximum number of services at the same time. All while the public's attention is laser focused on a single emotional issue. Are we talking about the city bus or school bus? It's interesting that you asked me that question. The public schools are funded by the government, and the public school buses are funded by the government, and the city buses are funded by the government. So every bus would be impacted by this, whether or not the workers go to work. You said 21 Savage. How you doing, 21 Savage? Are you amazed? Yes, I am. I am literally entertained. Dwayne DeWatt Johnson. So when you ask, are the buses impacted by that? Yes. Everything funded by the government is impacted, and that's an interesting dynamic, because I have been talking to people for the last couple of years about how you could literally save you money putting your children in public school and giving the public school the quantity of money you would have been giving a private school. And after you did that, you could claim that on your taxes using a voucher from the school, because a school is a nonprofit entity. It is government funded. And when it runs out of, it doesn't turn a profit. When it runs out of money, it just stops providing the service to the kids. So you can improve your kids' education by whatever school your kid goes to. Give them private school money every month, and then your kid would get a better education. Not to mention, they would be treated better by the teachers. You know what I mean? Because if you think that you pay what, $3,000 a semester for private school, right? You pay $3,000 a semester for public school, for free school. You're giving the school like $9,000 a year, almost $10,000 a year for your kid to go to school. Most parents don't do that. Most parents expect the teacher to provide the kid all the supplies that the kid needs. But that $10,000 a year is a tax deduction for you, right? But the school would love that extra $10,000. And imagine 300 students having at least 300 parents going to that school, or at least around 150 parents going to that school. If you're assuming that each one of the schools, the parents have like 2 kids, you're still $10,000 a parent. Not just $10,000 per child, but $10,000 per parent with 150 parents. That's $150,000. It's not a lot of money, but for the academic semester, it'd pay for a whole lot of stuff like bus drivers that are passing better background checks, equipment in the schools, updated books, updated computers, especially in low-income neighborhoods. You say you mean schools will shut down during the strike? I can't say that the schools will effectively shut down. I can say that the employees will not be getting paid temporarily. City buses will shut down. A lot of people depends on the city bus worker appointments, students, and leisure. Well, you have to think there's a difference between, okay, so when we say shut down, it means the money stopped flowing. But in America, we have been taught and trained by our ancestors duty and loyalty. And where duty and loyalty comes in at is that you go to work because you fundamentally in your core feel like you have to. And it doesn't matter if you're getting paid now or getting paid later, as long as you're guaranteed to get paid eventually, you will keep fulfilling your job duty through the shutdown, knowing that you're not going to get paid for it yet. That behavior will lead to frustrated people that show up for work on a regular basis. Yeah, he taught to float a loan. That's exactly what they're going to have to do. They're not only they're going to float the loans, because the financial providers know that this is happening right now, and anybody that has a Navy Federal credit account or a USAA credit bank account or something like that, you're getting notices about shutdowns and funding assistance for your loan options, because this is going to hurt you financially. Your income is going to stop. Doesn't mean that you're going to stop going to work. So when people who don't understand the full dynamic of the shutdown believes that like buses are going to stop moving and kids are going to have to walk to school. No, it means that the adults are no longer getting paid to provide you with the peace of mind that you needed. And truth be told, this goes all the way down to as much as like the police officers, because they're government funded too. So those same cops that when you dial 911, the same cop that you're cursing out at the traffic stop because they're giving you a ticket, is the same one that is not getting paid to be here right now. So all of your government agents, they're people too. They put on a uniform just like the rest of us. They show up for work just like the rest of us. And more so during the shutdown than any other time of the year, you got to show these people a little bit more admiration. I can't say respect them more, because if they're misbehaving, you got to show them a little bit more admiration. Like, bro, you are willing to go to work knowing that you're not going to get paid potentially this month. Like your last paycheck from January might be your last paycheck till March kind of situation, but you're going to show up for work for the next 30 days. I admire that. I'm not going to give you a bad time. That should be our mentality right now, because we're in the thick of it. He said, then people will start calling in sick. Yes, if the shutdown lasts too long and people start running out of money, they start running out of food, they can't afford to get to work, they don't have enough money to put gas in their car to show up for work anymore, they're going to start calling in sick. They're going to start cashing in their PTO days. They're going to start cashing in their sick days, their vacation days, whatever paid time off that they qualify for, they're going to start cashing it in right now, so that their money's not going to stop coming in, but they're going to stop coming in. Then you're going to have less people showing up. Then that means your 911 phone calls that used to have a 45-minute response time now going to be an hour and a half. That's going to be because they don't have enough people showing up. The buses are going to run slower because you don't have enough people showing up. The less teachers at school, the less activities at the school. No field trip this month. If there was a field trip, we don't have the budget for it now. You know, stuff like that. It's little things that's going to start trickling down where you're going to be like, damn, I thought this was going to be a thing. No, it's not. It does hurt. It doesn't sting you directly if you don't have kids. It doesn't sting you directly if you don't call the police. But if you need help and you're wondering why it takes like an hour and a half for the cops to get here during a shutdown and somebody's bleeding out on the sidewalk, it's because there's not enough cops to go around. That's why. Because of the shutdown. You know, this is a trickle-down effect. And the trickle-down effect can trickle all the way down to why isn't there enough stuff in a grocery store? Because nothing got bought, because nothing got shipped. Because it's a cause and effect. So why is DHS the flashpoint that everybody's been talking about for the past 3 months? It's because a tragic and explosive series of events in Minnesota poured gasoline on a really, really bad fire with this immigration debate. The Minnesota shooting became the political fuse for the shutdown because they tied DHS's day-to-day enforcement directly to the funding bill the Senate was about to vote on. And here's the step-by-step breakdown of what happened and why it mattered. First, the facts of what happened in Minnesota. On January 7th of 2026, an ICE officer in Minneapolis shot and killed Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old U.S. citizen, a mother, during what DHS called an immigration enforcement operation. I seen that video, and I have a lot of concerns about it on both sides because I have been in situations where I was in a car and there were police officers in front of my vehicle with guns pointed at my car, and I decided to put my car in park and turn off the engine, and that's why I'm alive today. However, other people have made the decision of fuck this shit, I'm out, and they will bank the wheel and start moving their vehicle. Now, I understand that the training is shoot the car so it doesn't run you over, but I also watched that video and seen that the car was driving away from the officer, not towards the officer. And I strongly believe, well, not officer, we call them officers because anybody with a gun that's not a civilian is assumed to be either an officer or a military agent. They're a fed, they're not a police officer, and their jurisdiction and their job had literally nothing to do with what looked like a routine traffic stop. They were supposed to wait for police or follow the vehicle until the vehicle got to its destination and wait for police in any routine traffic stop issue that could have happened, because technically your vehicle interfering with the transportation of other vehicles, law enforcement vehicles, government vehicles, whatever, is a traffic citation. It's not something that requires you to be murdered on the side of the street. However, it is also considered interfering with federal efforts, and in this scenario with immigration, it could be considered a national security breach, which could lead to treason actions, which is why I keep telling people be careful while y'all out there protesting, because you don't just get picked up for a public disturbance when you're getting picked up with ICE agents. You get picked up with domestic terrorism charges when you're out there messing with those ICE agents. So you don't want to really be out there deliberately causing confusion in the streets, even though you have the right to speak your mind. The negative fallout of a terrorist charge could impact your employment and impact future employment. So that, and it'll impact future housing for you as well, because a domestic terrorist charge, when they do a background check on you, nobody will rent to you with that kind of situation. But what happened to her, I still believe, should not have happened. It's just as bad as the woman that got murdered by the police officer when she dialed 911 and they came because she thought somebody was outside. They cleared the house. They went in her house, had a conversation with her in her kitchen, told her to turn off the stove, and then murdered her in her house. That cop, I hear, just got sentenced for that. And I think finally justice. But with this immigration situation, yeah, that was reckless, that she got gunned down as she left the scene, which I believe that should have been a police chase with a valid taser scenario, not an actual like lethal force scenario. But I saw her leaving. I don't see or hear any scenario where they had instructed her to get out of the car, or that they had put in effort to get her out of the car, or that she fought them to stop them from getting her out of the car. I didn't see anything that led to the need for her using lethal force, for them using lethal force on her. He said they were harassing ICE agents. See, and that's the thing. I didn't see that part. So she was in her car using her vehicle to stop ICE agents from doing what they were supposed to do. She qualifies for arrest, but not to be killed. At the end of the day, I'm not really on the side of people who break the law, but I still believe that people who break the law still not be murdered in the street. If it's an arrestable offense, like, put the effort into bringing them to jail. Don't put the effort into murdering them in the street. I understand that we had this war on crime thing back in the 80s, and kill them in the street because the legal system is a revolving door of criminals like Batman and Robin. But I still don't believe that a mother on her way going anywhere deserved to be shot down in her vehicle, even if she was being an asshole to ICE agents. I don't agree with that. That was just my scenario. But less than 3 weeks later, in a separate incident in the same city, a border patrol agent, notice, not ICE, a border patrol agent, and a CBP officer shot and killed another U.S. citizen, Alex Preddy, 37-year-old, also ICU nurse who worked with veterans. I think that's when people really started getting pissed off. Now, these shootings occurred in the context of the president's expanded immigration crackdown, which had deployed a large number of federal immigration officers into Minnesota communities. Now, the backlash was immediate and intense. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz publicly condemned what he called yet another appalling shooting by federal agents, and demanded the administration terminate this operation. I still have the understanding that any recognized search and seizure with a warrant for illegal immigrants would have a list of people recognized as non-Americans, or addresses of where non-Americans might be located at, and they would be going specifically to these locations and then IDing everyone. Now, I told you before that under the current circumstances, since March of last year, the star on your driver's license is mandatory. So if you don't have a driver's license or state ID, have your passport with you at all times, because I did say before May, I said they're going to get aggressive with this because it became mandatory. It was optional back in 2002 when we first started doing it, but it's mandatory now to have that. So now, let me see your ID. No, I'm an American citizen. I don't have to show you anything. I didn't commit a crime. Well, I have to verify that. So even on a traffic stop, when cops are being assholes and they have no valid justification to pull you over, just to make sure you're not an immigrant in this vehicle, they still have to see your ID. You need to at least carry with you and show your ID. You ain't got to hand it to them, but they've got to be able to see the star on the ID, or at least they got to get close enough to it to read U.S. citizen on the document, because otherwise they can use the excuse that you refuse to prove that you were not an immigrant, which requires them to detain you and validate that you are an American citizen before releasing you, and you resist arrest, and that leads them to use the right to use excessive force, and sometimes that excessive force can lead into the loss of life or at least minimalistically severe injury. I think that is absurd behavior, but the consequences of resistance is based on your decision to resist. As an American citizen, you might have certain rights, but those rights have consequences. If you cooperate, you have certain entitlements. It's easier to fight for your entitlements if you survive the situation than it is for you to defend yourself in a court of law after you've stood on your rights. So if you hurt or kill a police officer, you're in criminal court trying to get your freedom versus surviving a negative experience where you have relinquished all of your rights in the moment and then you have a massive lawsuit for the violation of your civil rights. You're alive now, the situation is over, and now you're in a court determining how much money you should get paid for what you went through. Big difference. He said he was protesting, right, and also impeding. But did he deserve to get shot? I believe everybody there had a taser. Why couldn't 5 tasers hit this guy instead of 5 guns? My thought, he should have been stunned, pepper sprayed. They had riot shield spray. If you hit him in the face with a can of that, what is it called? C40, whatever, in the face where his whole face is orange now, I think he would have been so busy not being able to breathe that he would have let you cuff him so that you could get the stuff off of his face because he wouldn't be able to breathe. But they went to lethal force instead of. He said it's a yellow star. Dude, they could have that could have been a 2-star action. It does not require this ain't even GTA. It could have been a 2-star action, but that did not require them murdering the guy in my observation. Make sure, like Michael said, make sure y'all like and subscribe as y'all come through here because we're going to be going through more of this situation. Because and anybody here who has a position on this, if you're watching from Twitter or Twitch, feel free to put your position on the comment section because we will definitely take that into advisement and put it across the screen because if you know something about it, if you were there, if you heard something about it, let me know. But from what I've seen so far, it wasn't supposed to go the way it went. So the governor wants to remove thousands of untrained and aggressive officers from their state. And I agree with that. Local protests exploded after bystanders recording surfaced because they were all over TikTok, they were all over social media. And that appeared to contradict the official account of one shooting, which claimed a victim had used a car as a weapon when the officer was standing on the driver's side of the vehicle and the woman was making a right turn in the vehicle while she was not surrendering to any type of detainment. She was not deliberately attempting to plow over the officer. She was, in what I observed in the video, going around whatever vehicle that was on the passenger side of her vehicle with another government vehicle on the driver's side of her vehicle and a federal agent on foot on the driver's side of the vehicle. And she went around the vehicle on the passenger side of her vehicle and got gunned down as she went up the street. That's what I saw. Now, the video suggested that she was actually trying to drive away. Okay. And nationally, the killings escalated in already fierce debate over the tactics of Trump's mass deportation effort, with critics arguing that immigration officers were acting far beyond the normal bounds of civil immigration enforcement. I know a lot of people are going to ask, well, what does this have to do with the shutdown? One of the things that they were talking about in the budget was how ICE agents were getting a $40,000 a year bonus to be out there while they're murdering folks in the street. Now, some people might be thinking, that's not a lot. Let's think. The average American gets what, $2,500 bonus, Christmas bonus, or less. And then ICE agents are getting $40,000 bonus. For what? Your job is to knock on the door and arrest whoever opens the door. And you're supposed to be serving warrants at specific locations. And even if traffic is bad because of protesters, you've got no limit to the quantity of time it takes for you to collect this person and bring them back to the office and put him in a room by himself. For $40,000 on top of your regular salary, you're getting a bonus. And there are a lot of Americans that their annual salary is $40,000 or less, and these guys are getting a pay raise. So that's where the shutdown comes from, because when you start talking about the DoD budget, the Department of Defense budget, that what employee get if they're making $50,000 a year as a salary, why are they getting another $40,000 as a bonus? You said, remember Kent State. Okay, so you're asking me an interesting question. Why are you calling it murder? Okay, I'm going to call it for what it is. If you take a life without justifiable cause, it's murder. Murder in self-defense is still murder, but it is considered self-defense. But everybody who watched the guy get killed, he was being jumped by 5 people that were punching and kicking him like Rodney King. The guy was on the ground, almost in a ball, being punched and kicked by 5 or 6 people. And then a gun came out and shots were fired. I do not believe in that scenario that the 5 armed agents, 6, 7, 8 armed agents that also carried pepper sprays, mace, and tasers did not have an advantage over him. I cannot believe that they were in a life-threatening situation where they outnumbered him physically and then outnumbered him tactically, that any one of them were in enough immediate danger to murder this guy in the street, which is why I'm going to call it murder. I got danger pay in the military. Okay, but they didn't say hazard pay, Michael. They said bonus. Hazard pay and bonus are 2 different things. So let me identify this. Hazard pay is when you're in a dangerous situation unexpectedly and you're going to get paid more because you're putting your life on the line. A bonus means you're at work every day and good job, 40 extra grand. Big difference. He had a gun. If he was an American, he should have had a big gun. Not gonna lie, if I lived in Minnesota, I'd have quite a few. And if I was traveling in the midst of that scenario, I would have been out there with some guns. Likely would not have participated in the protests with the guns, but the fact is that he has every right as an American citizen to have a gun at a protest. Either don't you think it's harassment? I don't believe that anybody should be outside when red and blue lights are traveling up the street. If you listen to the Carter 3, Carter 4, The Block is Hot from Lil Wayne, we live by that in New Orleans. When them boys show up, we run. And when them boys leave, we come back. It should be a ghost town wherever there are ICE agents at, in my observation. Nobody should be outside. They should call out of work because ICE agents are passing through their neighborhood. But that does not mean that they don't have the right to be out there protesting. And it does not mean that he doesn't have the right to be out there with a gun in his possession during a protest. Right, he does, but not to pull it out on an ICE agent. Well, think about this, though. You're claiming, well, he shouldn't pull his gun on an ICE agent. He was getting his ass kicked by like 6 of them. So if he was attacked by an ICE agent because he was recording and the ICE agent was ballsy and didn't want to be recorded, at the same time, he had every right to defend himself, but they murdered him. If he went out there with the sole purpose of taking shots at an ICE officer, the shots would have happened before they jumped him. He was being jumped before shots got fired. So whether he pulled the gun out, whether the gun fell out after quite a few minutes of him getting his ass kicked on camera, then they shot him. At the end of the day, they had every capability of macing him before the gun came out, tasing him before the gun came out, and detaining him before the gun came out. Because with 6 people there, bro, there is still the capability. Each person grab a limb, somebody grab a head. George Floyd, somebody knee in the back, he can't get the gun because they were beating his ass out there, bro. You mean curfew? No, there's a difference between curfew versus do not be outside when the police are coming. A curfew is something that is officially authorized by the government. Refusing to be in the same place at the same time as a law enforcement agent or a federal agent is completely different. That's not a curfew. That is me running when I see cops, when I see red and blue lights. That is me fleeing when I see black SUVs with red and blue lights on them with tinted windows. That is me not staying here anymore because there's a convoy of vehicles coming through my neighborhood and 2 of them are tanks. Fuck that. We're leaving. And we're not coming back until they're gone. That's how that works. So that's not a curfew. Interfering with law enforcement is not a protest. That doesn't change anything. First of all, they're not law enforcement. First of all, they're federal agents and they're supposed to be executing a warrant to seize a specific individual. Second of all, doesn't matter if it is not lawful for them to be out there doing what they're doing. It doesn't require them to get shot. That's my perspective. The guy, I watched a few videos where some jackass was deliberately standing in the street in front of a federal vehicle, blocking its mode of travel, holding on to the grill guard, sliding under the truck like they were going to run him over kind of thing. And if they would have moved forward on that, somebody would have said, oh, no, they ran him over. And he would have deserved it, in my opinion. But at the same time, shooting that guy is not the answer. Interfering with lawful business of any type of federal agent is qualifiable for a physical arrest. And whatever effort you got to put into detaining the person, you put into detaining the person alive, not dead. I didn't say not injured. I said alive. So had they shot him in the leg or shot him in the arm where he's not dead, but he's in ICU, okay, he had a gun. You took out a limb. She said it's not our fight or problem. Damn right. Damn right. And we're not supposed to be out there. We are not, as American citizens. This is going to be the argument against the reason why a lot of people are going to feel like what's happening is fair. The argument is, I'm going to go back to Nicole's comment. It is not our fight or our problem, because if you've been here for 10 or 20 years without getting your citizenship, you've established a life here, you put your kids in school here, all of this stuff, and Donald Trump told you this time last year, to either register for your citizenship or get out of the country. He told you in March, April, and May, I will pay for your exit up to $1,500 to voluntarily leave the country. After August, you are here defiantly at your own expense. No American citizen should be putting their life or their freedom on the line to keep a person defiant of law in the country, which is why no American citizen should be out there protesting. They should protest for the little black boy that got swooped up amongst a bunch of Mexicans talking about we didn't know. Yeah, we can protest that shit, but we're not supposed to be protesting nothing else, because that was an American citizen. It had nothing to do with the ICE raids. But when the women are getting murdered, when the men are getting murdered, these are American citizens being shot up. That doesn't matter if they're interfering with police business. They don't deserve to be murdered. Okay, they deserve to be arrested because they're breaking the law. Okay, this is one of the reasons why people say that Democrats are idiots, because Democrats would say that even criminals have rights. And some people don't believe that. It's ICE at your door. I agree with Nicole. ICE ain't at my door. I agree with Nicole too. ICE ain't at my door. They would never come to my door. And if they came to my door, I would not open it. George Floyd died of drug OD. I don't care. They said I can't breathe with a bunch of people standing on his back. And at the end of the day, he got arrested because he did something he wasn't supposed to do. But once they put the handcuffs on him, they could have put him in the back of the car and let him chill out. They did not have to stay there and keep him on the ground. There was enough agents there where one could have grabbed each arm and the other could have grabbed each leg, and they could have carried him like a hog and threw him in the back of the car any kind of way and left him lying on his back face up in the back of the squad car until he calmed down. And then they could have drove him to jail. He didn't have to stay there on the scene till his last breath. That's my thought. He said the world is absolutely crazy. It is. A lot of people have this ability to put their emotions on and run out there and go try to do something. And it's self-validation, because you're protesting for people, just like the people that were out there protesting for Palestine. You had black people out there protesting for the Palestinians, and then they're getting cursed out by the people who they're protesting for. I understand it that everybody wants to see equality occur, but it's not going to happen. We have outside of racism, we have social classism, and then we have nationalism. So if you're not from here, there's going to be some bias. If you don't make as much money as somebody else, there's going to be some bias. And if you have any different shade of a tan, there's going to be some bias. And when COVID was out there, if you had high cheekbones, there was going to be some bias. So there's never a situation where there's if any group can be classified by you people, somebody else is going to have bias against it. It is what it is. But this particular situation is an opportunity from almost 13 months ago where you had the ability to start your citizenship process, which would have grandfathered you in to whatever Joe Biden had in place with the asylum thing that just recently got banned. Okay? So they could have gotten their citizenship. They didn't want to for whatever reason. Then, now almost a year later, you had the choice. Now it's by force. They're coming to get them. No American citizen should be out there. If that's your baby mama or your baby daddy that's getting deported, you knew they were an illegal immigrant when you started dating them. You knew that they were an illegal immigrant when you started having children for them, and you know that your child will stay with you, but your partner will be shipped back to the country they came from. And deportation is only a 10-year ban, so it's not that long. You're going to serve more time in jail for domestic terrorism than what you would being deported. You know, it's not like it's a permanent exile. But you should have thought about that and got your stuff together before they started knocking on your door to come and snatch your partner. But why are people protesting because their neighbor is getting taken? That makes no damn sense. I will not bear witness to my neighbor being unnecessarily beat to death on the side of the road, but I'll be goddamn if my neighbor is going to commit a crime and I'm going to stop them from going to jail for it. Because if I committed a crime, what person is going to be sitting there fighting to keep me from going to jail? And then when we think about that, let's ask ourselves that same interesting question. Out of all of us that have ever gotten arrested before in our lives in America, what person stopped us from getting arrested for anything? So why are we now sticking our necks out to people who are clearly breaking the law? But this is going to be where it connects directly to the shutdown that we're about to experience right now, because Senate Democrats explicitly framed the shootings as systemic DHS problems. They argued that Congress could not simply renew funding without fundamentally changing how DHS, ICE, and CBP operate. And this is specifically not just because of the shootings, because while I understand, Michael, you have an objection to the guy that was out there with the gun or the girl with the car, but what about the ICE agents that were pointing their guns at people just because they were out there with cell phones and picket signs? And there was 2 or 3 different videos that went viral about an ICE agent that would just put his gun out and just wave it at everybody and put his gun back. They were more than 20 feet away from him. They were far enough away. They were safe distance observing and shouting that he was in the vehicle. He was not going to be harmed by the people there, but he's waving his gun around, making threats. That behavior is inappropriate. If the people are too close to the vehicle and they deserve to be detained, detain them. But don't threaten death to individuals that are telling you to get out of their city. I have a job to do. You can tell me all day long to get out of your city, but I got paid to be here and I'm going to stay here till the job gets done. The longer you keep me here, the longer I stay here. So the quicker you get out of my way, the quicker I'm gone. You decide how long I stay here. That logic means we could be here all fucking day. You're going to get tired, bro. You're going to get tired of taking that. We could literally sit in this SUV and watch Netflix until y'all go home, and then we're still going to execute that warrant. But why wave guns at civilians that are unarmed? Then Michael claims about the guy that had the gun at the protest. Well, his thought process was shot for a shot. It didn't work out that way, but hey. Now, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and other Democratic leaders state that they would not provide the votes needed to advance the broader government funding package if it included a DHS bill that left current enforcement practices intact. So for the first time, it's the Democrats' fault that this government is being shut down in the last year and a half. I know some people are going to say, no, it was the Democrats' fault last time. No. Trump refused to push it forward the first shutdown. Democrats refused to push it forward this time around. So think about that. Now, but they began insisting on specific policy changes as a condition for their votes, limiting on, they want the limits on roving patrols in communities, meaning all of these convoys of ICE agents traveling through people's communities. They want to reduce that. Stronger warrant requirements for agents, meaning that there's a specific detailed location, an individual or a group of individuals or a group of locations that they're supposed to show up at, and updated codes of conduct and accountability. So as some Republican voters claim that Democrats are idiots, but Democrats are over here arguing for your safety. They're saying, hey, these guys are out here with a bunch of assault rifles acting crazy, and we need to hold them responsible for the authority that we gave them. We gave them a damn license to kill, and now we're saying that they need to have a license to detain. And that is a huge change. And this completely unraveled a nearly done spending deal, because before the Minnesota crisis, Congress had already assembled a multi-bill appropriation package that included DHS and several other departments. So the House Republicans had even passed it, expecting the Senate to do the same, but the shooting flipped the key. Senate Democrats, who had previously supported similar funding bills, several went on record, they went on the record announcing that they would now vote no on any package that funded DHS without new guardrails on enforcement, because Republicans hold only a narrow Senate majority and they need Democratic votes to reach the 60 vote threshold to break a filibuster. And the loss of the Democrats meant the combined package was suddenly dead on arrival if DHS remained in the package. And this is true. They actually demanded body cameras and everything else on these officers so that, or federal agents, so that when they're out there in these situations, you've got a first person camera angle of how this person was behaving before he got shot. So an officer with an active body camera or a federal agent with an active body camera is going to think twice about the decisions that they're going to make, because hindsight is 2020, and the person not in the situation, not flooded with emotion or overly flooded with emotion after the fact, is going to make a broad spectrum decision about what could have been done versus what should have been done in that situation. And if they can decide that there was other ways that you could have resolved that without taking the shot, they're going to determine that the shot taken was unjustifiable, and you will, after the fact, be penalized for the actions that you took, which will cause officers to less often draw their firearm unnecessarily. They will have to show proof of provocation of the threat of death before they use those assault rifles on civilians, which will, it's not going to stop you from getting maced. It's just going to stop you from getting maced unnecessarily. It's not going to stop you from being shot. It's going to stop you from being shot unnecessarily. So if you're out there throwing rocks at a cop and he throws bullets back at you, I mean, you probably shouldn't. You can't even throw a snowball at him. Don't even play with him. Michael said, what department does ICE represent? DHS. ICE is part of the Department of Defense. So DHS is a package deal that includes ICE. So they're making a tactical move here. To avoid an immediate full-scale shutdown, Senate Democrats negotiated a deal with President Donald Trump, and the agreement was to split off DHS from the rest of the funding package. Under this new plan, most agencies would get their full year funding through September 30th, but DHS would only get a 2-week stopgap measure, meaning that they're only going to be paid for the next couple of weeks. And this was designed to buy them time for a separate high-stakes fight over immigration enforcement rules. What had been one big spending agreement was now on 2 tracks: a near census or near consensus bill for most of the government, and an incredibly contentious DHS bill that Democrats were determined to rewrite. So for every Republican that doesn't like Democrats, you can like them just a little bit more. Doesn't make them geniuses, but at least they're trying to keep you safe while you're out there setting the streets on fire. All right. He said, book for the night, Man and the State, the political philosopher. Random House, 1947. Isn't it amazing how history repeats itself? Because Michael giving y'all books from the early 1900s. And y'all can get these books off the I don't have them on the show, but y'all can get these books offline and probably find you an audio file of them, and you would be capable of reading these books and learning a lot of stuff from these books, which would kind of show you a repeat of how history is replaying itself here. These DHS, I thought was Department of Health and Social Services. They included ICE agents, the immigration. The Department of Immigration is being included in DHS. So let me go back and explain to you DHS, because I had it listed at the top of the show like an hour and some change ago. DHS is let's see, what do we list that as up here? Let me go back up there, because you have CBP officers, you have Border Patrol, that's included in that. DHS is including ICE in it with U.S. military, national health programs, and critical infrastructure projects. So since that's Let me back that up a little bit. Defense. So defense, labor, health, and human services. And ICE agents are going to be part of defense. Okay. Defense, health, and services. So the national security claim of the um, ICE agents being out there collecting the immigrants, that national security claim is a defense bill to remove all non-Americans from the country. And because that's part of a defense bill, DHS is going to fund the ICE agents. So so DHS, ICE, CBP, all under the same payroll, right? That's how that works. If that helps any. Let me get back to where we were. All right, now Nicole's got a question. She says, "Where's all the manpower coming from? Because most you people want to make tactics, not patrol neighborhoods killing people. The manpower, you're gonna love this. You know that GI Bill? Oh yeah, join and get free ride to college. GI Bill, they got a lot of people on reserve, whether it's National Guard, whether it's Army, whatever. They got a lot of American citizens that have not been called to active duty overseas that can be called to active duty for this. They pay the average person that probably joined the military because their life sucked. And some of those people, just like when you see some police officers that used to be bullied in high school and they go and be cops and then they're dicks as cops, you will find people that now have more authority over the general population than they had over their entire lives, being extremely reckless with the power that they have. And that's not every officer. That's not every agent. That's not every military personnel. There are some people. It's a small quantity in every large group that makes the whole group look bad. One or two jackasses. Because think about it. If you're in an SUV, if you're in a Suburban, 10 people, and one person gets out the Suburban and does something dickish, the society that watched that happen is going to think everybody in that vehicle is an asshole. Now, if you've got one person out of 3 SUVs that does something stupid, and then everybody's got to get out the SUV and de-escalate the situation, society is going to look at the one stupid person's behavior and the 15 other people that backed him up on that behavior and think that agency. Now we're not just talking about the 15 people across 3 vehicles. We're talking about the whole company now is corrupt. So when you wonder where, we've got a few hundred million, I can't say, we might have. Yeah, we probably got at least 100 million reserved Americans, people who enlisted and did their basic training and went back home. You've got people that signed up for reserve that never went out. We've got people that everyday people when they started first doing the in camps that they were getting rid of. I think it was in Tennessee. I think it was where they were getting rid of the homeless in camps. They were using National Guard. Those were reserves. People that are not in active duty, people that you don't see every day walking around in military fatigues. Your local cashier, your local stock boy, your local Uber driver that they just called them to action, hand them an assault rifle for the first time since basic training, and they're like, give you resistance, shoot them. That's the kind of behavior that they're showing us. And you're like, damn. So when they get out there, and they're able to pepper spray everybody and get no consequences. They're able to piss off society and get no consequences for that, all in a day's work. They start becoming extremely reckless. It is easy to get that manpower, but they need to get more responsible individuals performing these tasks, because their goal is supposed to be to come and collect select individuals. So your question is, so DHS is now militarized. Uh, I don't know where you get the word now from, because our defense is militarized. Um, there has never been a scenario where our defense was not militarized. But is the policing of our streets now militarized? Yes. And that's one of the reasons why the bill got jacked up. From George Sorio. Also, as long as we live in a society, there will be control, and the more people, the more control. But see, the funny thing is that there's so many more civilians out there than there are people enforcing the authority. And like the example of the original Black Panther Party, if everyone took up arms equivocally and responsibly and appropriately, kept themselves and their family members safe under the law, where they would not be stopping law enforcement or any federal agent from enforcing any deportation laws, but they would protect and prevent bystanders from being unnecessarily taken outside of lawful action. How much can 15 ARs do against a population of 300,000 ARs? If everybody had one, we would have more respect between one another. If it was a lot like Israel, if it was like a couple of the states in Texas where every adult over the age of 18 must have a Second Amendment. If everyone had one and we were all outside with one, they would less likely misbehave. But because everyone is unarmed, except for the one guy that got murdered by 6 people, that's the whole reason why we can say the one guy out there with his Second Amendment constitutional right was wrong. Because he was supposed to be unarmed and fearing for his safety as he was getting his ass whooped by 6 people. But in all honesty, everyone out there with a cell phone should have been out there with an AR, and they would not have been beating his ass. He still would have went to jail. He would not have gotten shot, but they would not have been beating his ass, because he didn't need to get that. The kicks and the punches is not called arresting somebody. I don't care if he had a gun or not. Kicks and punches is not arresting somebody. Holding his arms and holding his legs and then tase him until he stops, that's arresting somebody. But kicking and punching him, that's gang violence. That's what you see these young boys out here doing to each other in the streets. And I'm not going to validate that by, oh, well, he shouldn't have been at a protest with a gun. He could have been out there with a bazooka. You're not supposed to jump him. You can detain him. Then you're going to ask me, well, what if he was using the bazooka to harm somebody? If he blows up a federal vehicle, then he becomes a terrorist. Once he becomes a terrorist, he put his life on the line. You take him out because he shot a bazooka at a federal vehicle. You took him out. But I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, well, it was wrong for you to shoot the guy with the bazooka because he blew up a federal vehicle. I'm not going to say that. But I am going to say that you shouldn't have curb stomped the guy when you had other ways to stop him. Because you hit him in the neck with a taser, bro, there's not much resistance you're going to get from that. And here's the other part, because you said he had a gun, but he wasn't pointing the gun at the crowd. He wasn't pointing the gun at the officers. He had the gun while he was on the ground in the fetal position, getting kicked and punched, being uppercutted from above. Again, they should have done something different. This could be the reason for the fall of what's that, Incas? This is the reason with the fall of the Indians. Yeah, this is the reason for this is going to be the next civil war with this type of behavior. Rewrite the Fifth Amendment and change the terms of presidents to 12 years or 3 terms. I thought Trump was trying to do that already. But if you rewrite the Fifth Amendment to 3 terms in a lifetime or 12-year stints, that ain't going to change what happened. When Trump said deport all non-Americans, which includes the sovereign nation folks that renounced their citizenship, he did not say kill anybody. I do not even believe he used Martin Luther King's terms of by any means necessary. As I recall, he said go get them and remove them. So they're supposed to be detained alive and then relocated alive. Nowhere in the initiative is the loss of life supposed to occur unless lethal force is used to resist detainment, which means that they would have to be actively shooting at the ICE agents to prevent from being deported. An American citizen is not supposed to be in a position where he is having to shoot at an ICE agent. And a woman in a car with no weapon driving away doesn't constitute that dynamic. And for the sake of not being sexist, had it been a man in the car driving away, still didn't deserve to be shot to death. Yeah, you could have followed him. You could have followed him till he ran out of gas. You could have put some military choppers on him, followed him to work, and came and arrested him on his job. You didn't have to kill him. You didn't have to kill the driver of that SUV, and you didn't have to kill the guy on the block. And that's the reason why the Democrats shut down the government, to make sure that these guys behave better. So what had been one big spending agreement was now a 2-track scenario, right? And this is why it's central to the shutdown itself. Once DHS was peeled out, the broader appropriations package could move forward, but the political cost was a partial shutdown for all of the other agencies in that bill, because their funding lapsed before the House could return from the weekend to vote on the Senate's new plan. And that kills those killings of the 2 U.S. citizens in Minnesota didn't just spark outrage. They provided the concrete justification for Democrats to say no more blank checks for DHS and blow up the original all-in-one spending deal at the last minute. So make no mistakes, this shutdown was not an accident. It wasn't some last-minute negotiation failure. It was a planned, calculated event baked right into the congressional calendar. The proof is in the timeline. The Senate, knowing the deadline was closing in, managed to pass a package of spending bills, but for a bill to become a law, both the Senate and the House have to pass it. So what was the House doing? Absolutely nothing. He says, well, the car is a weapon. Bro, a car is a weapon, a pencil's a weapon, a cell phone's a weapon, a door is a weapon, this laptop's a weapon, the cord off of the webcam is a weapon, the chair I'm sitting in is a weapon. If I could take my shirt off and use it, that's a weapon. That is not a valid excuse, okay? A shoe is a weapon. Matter of fact, when you throw a shoe, it's considered a projectile. So what are you going to do? Ban everything that moves? That's not logic. The fact of the matter is that they are supposed to be trained to handle appropriate. Wasn't he obstructing? If the gentleman, okay, so the video recording that went viral showed the police officers beating that guy's ass. There's also a lot of videos where people are out there recording at what is reasonably observed as a safe distance, and the ICE agent walks over to the recorder and tries to take the camera from them and then arrest the person because they're watching the officers in their line of duty, which is their constitutional right, their First Amendment constitutional right to record what's going on, freedom of press. And these individuals are being arrested just for standing outside recording. So is it obstruction? Well, that really depends. Yelling absurdities to law enforcement is not obstruction. That's your First Amendment right. Blocking their mode of travel with a vehicle, that's obstruction. Standing in front of moving vehicles, that's dangerous. It's jaywalking, and it's also obstruction. having a firearm with you while you travel through the streets, that is not obstruction. And in obstruction, it still validates being arrested, not shot and killed. He says, thanks, Nicole. I mean, Michael, you can support Nicole so she can keep coming back. It doesn't justify the dude got killed. He shouldn't have got killed. DHS, Department of Homeland Security. And that's going to put the guy in the same, that's going to, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, is still going to put ICE agents under that payroll, that salary. And that's why DHS didn't get funded, because they were funding ICE. ICE wasn't on a separate budget. Oh, he's thanking you because he's trying to be the devil's advocate here, because Michael's a very smart man, has a lot of knowledge, 72 years old right now, but he's being devil's advocate about why the person got what he got. I'm not saying that the person was in the right when he was out there acting a fool. What I'm saying is that the now she doesn't have your back. She confused about the situation. The the guy didn't. I'm not saying that the guy was in the right when he got what happened to him, because bad decisions are still bad decisions. What I'm saying is that two bad decisions don't justify each other. The officers, the agents, the ICE agents killing both of those American citizens was not justifiable in my observation, regardless of how you spin it. Because if the woman was driving away in the car, she was driving away in the car. The police officer was not ran over by the woman where his body was crushed by the vehicle and a separate ICE agent shot her because she had killed somebody with her car. See what I'm saying? The person that I guess wanted her to not drive away killed her. That is not justifiable in my observation. The man that was jumped by 6 guys, doesn't matter if he had a gun or not on him, because they wasn't able to search him because they had no opportunity to successfully fully detain him, but they had every opportunity to mace and tase him before the gun fell out. But that does not mean that they had every right to kill him. Okay, so while Nicole got your back, you say she got your back, it's not going to justify the fact that what happened to them wasn't supposed to happen. Were they reporters? Freedom of the press? Okay, so here's the thing about freedom of the press. With social media right now, everybody with a cell phone is freedom of the press. Everybody live streaming the incident is freedom of the press. Everybody recording it to upload it on their social media platform next week after they edit it and put some interesting background music to it, freedom of the press. So you do not have to go and fill out documents with the government and get a license to be a reporter to qualify for freedom of the press. You are documenting in real time what is happening on the streets, and that becomes news, freedom of the press. So your ability to record without interfering is what is justifiable under freedom of the press. And without interfering isn't limited to not saying anything. You have to not stop them from doing what they're trying to do. Now, what they're going to claim is that you're distracting them from their job. And the distraction from their job by yelling obscenities is obstruction. And that's not true. Your First Amendment right to curse them out while they're carrying this guy out, hey, they can do that. How you doing, Eric? Like everyone has a service dog now? No, not everyone. Just the people that are responsible enough to have trained animals. Actually, you have a lot more people with emotional support animals than they do service dogs. And emotional support animals and service dogs don't have the same rights. And you can identify the difference between a service dog and an emotional support animal, not only based on its training, but the reason why you have them. What the tasks and requirements that the animal is supposed to perform. If it's just to keep you company and help you with getting on a plane, that's an emotional support animal. But if it has certain tasks, like a guide dog or something that's tracking your heart rate, arrhythmia, something to that effect, peanut allergy, stuff like that effect, that's a service dog. But the difference between, but your ability to devalue, with this comment, a service animal, is equivalent to your ability to devalue people's constitutional rights. And I think that's an incorrect mindset to have, because the reason why these soldiers are in other countries fighting and dying allegedly for our freedom and our rights to do what we need to do and do what we want to do, where the Constitution grants us the capabilities to do whatever we want to do in this country, as long as we are not causing harm to someone else or someone else's stuff. My right to have a service animal, if I have one, is my right based on any physical or mental disability that I may have that requires me to have a service animal. My right to have a firearm is my right, as long as I have not committed a felony, and I am not intending on using my firearm to commit a felony. And there's no reason why my ability to exercise my right is devalued because a few trigger happy individuals in camouflage are murdering people in Minnesota. Likewise, my right to drive a motor vehicle through a riot, my right to drive past a federal agent in my vehicle, is my right to do, and I should not be gunned down for that. Whether they wanted me to stop or not doesn't change the fact that it is still my right. So you got to understand that rights versus, she said color purple. I appreciate that. So you have to understand, Michael, that the actions of the individuals did warrant arrest. I'm not saying that nothing should have happened to them. I'm saying they should have lived through it. That's what I'm saying. Okay. And when they were out there throwing bricks off the overpass at the ICE agents, technically that's attempted murder. But the person who threw the brick, should you chase him down and shoot him? No. You should arrest him for that. I'm thinking of an emotional support, different point. Yes. Yes. An emotional, and a lot of people, they don't just have emotional support dogs. They got emotional support cats, iguanas, snakes. They got service animal ponies, miniature horses. They got that. It's not just limited to dogs. But emotional support animal, it could be anything with a pulse. It could be an emotional support parakeet, for Christ's sake. And yeah, just about everyone's got an emotional support something, because they don't have a responsible partner to be an emotional support. They don't have enough money to pay for an emotional therapist. But we have a country full of traumatized people, right? But yet again, the laws limit where you can go with an emotional support animal. You can take a service dog to a restaurant, but you can't take an emotional support animal to a restaurant. You can take a service dog to a courthouse, but you can't take an emotional support animal to a courthouse. But how do you determine which one is which? There's no paperwork. There's no government requirement to show paperwork. You can register your animal online, and you can purchase identification cards for your registered animal that shows that you intend to use this animal as a service animal. But it could have absolutely no training. Or you could have a highly trained animal that behaves better than everybody's kids and every man's ex-wife. And at the end of the day, that animal have no registration on them. There's no laws to indicate which one is which as far as observation. And then HIPAA laws prevent anybody from being required to show paperwork on the animal, because you have to show the disability to show the service animal. When they separate the disability from the fact that the animal is a duty-bound animal, then they can make it mandatory that you get an identification card. Yeah, but see, this is the thing. Everyone can get an identification card for them. But again, everyone can get an identification card for them. And no, it's not like I said it twice because the show was skipping. No, truthfully, everyone who has a service dog can get an identification card for their service dog, but everyone who has an animal can get an identification card for their animal, because there are official websites that you register your animal and of unofficial websites that sell the equipment the same way you can go and buy a service dog a harness off of Amazon. There is no medical requirement to get the identification card, because the medical requirement is a HIPAA protected scenario and the identification card is separate. But because the disability has to be directly attached to the animal at the same time. In order to prove that the animal is for a disability, you have to show the disability, and that's a HIPAA violation. So they don't have to show the card. So the only way you can tell that the person has a trained animal is that the animal is trained. Is it a service animal or an emotional support animal or just a pet? No one will ever know until a lawsuit comes out for not allowing that person to enter the building. But in that situation, do you fight your way into the building and stand on your rights? No, you let them kick you out, and then you sue the establishment. And by the time that lawsuit is over, that establishment will regret not letting you into the building. She said, well, how do you get a dog to become an emotional support animal? Okay, so all animals are supposed to be trained before they come out of the house. An emotional support animal can be verified the need of the animal from a therapist for emotional stability. A service animal has more of a definitive need that directly impacts your health, not just your emotional status. Also verified by a therapist or a primary care physician, psychiatrist, or something to that effect. Like depending on if you have the kind of service animal that helps with your mobility, a chiropractor or somebody like that can validate the fact that you're utilizing this animal for work purposes, where it's not a pet, it's not a toy, it's a tool. And in a lot of states around the United States, a service animal is considered a medical assistive device equivalent to a cane, a wheelchair, or a walker, not an animal. In travel, it is considered luggage, not an animal. But there are still some limitations with travel. You might have to buy an extra seat based on the size of the animal in order for the animal to have comfort on the airline. But because it is considered a medical assistive device or luggage, city ordinances for leash laws do not apply to service animals because they're not pets, which is what the city ordinance is for. They are tools, which are not identified on the state and city level. And on the federal level and some state levels, those tools are considered medical assistive devices. But no, you don't just get those authorizations online, Michael. You have to go to a medical provider that validates that this animal is benefiting your condition, which would require you to go to a psychiatrist or a therapist or something like that and get that validated. Yeah, support dogs are very well trained, but not everybody who goes outside with their dog has a support dog, and not everybody who walks into a grocery store has a support dog. You have some homeless people that take their pet with them into whatever establishment they go to because they can't leave their dog unattended, and will have documents. Actually, no. The law does not require you to show the documents. It's actually a HIPAA violation to ask for the documents. So if a person doesn't want to go through the harassment of identifying the service animal, they will have and show the registration of the service animal separate from any disability that's related to it. But all they would have to do is answer two simple questions that are the only two legal questions that can be answered or can be asked um, is that intended to be a service animal, and what purpose is it here for? So what task is it doing for you? Not what disability do you have, or why do you have this dog, and not even, oh, it's got to be on a leash. No, there's no requirement for that. No establishment, no law enforcement officer can determine how you handle your animal, but you have a heightened responsibility to have your animal with or without a leash. So at the end of the day, you have the responsibility when you carry your dog out into public to maintain. But the law now is written for not only tethers, but harnesses, electronic devices, voice commands, hand gestures, and body language. So you can have a dog completely off the leash, but as long as you can show that you can contain it, you're good to go. But you can tell an animal that's been well trained. You are right. A doctor online will ask you questions. Typically, you do this stuff in person with your primary doctors, but with the way things are going right now, Trump put out a Trump phone that has concierge doctors on the call, and through his phone line, yeah, you can talk to a doctor on the phone from Donald Trump's plan and get a doctor to verify your service dog. You can do a video call from your smartphone and have a doctor verify your service animal. because the service animal requirement is a medical need. But the other half of that that people forget is it still has to be trained. If you got a medical need and it's wild up and down, like climbing trees and ripping up furniture and sticking his nose in other people's backpacks and stuff, it doesn't belong in public. If it's sniffing somebody else's butt instead of paying attention to you, if you're going to the left and it's going to the right, it's not trained. But if it's going where you're going and it follows your instructions and the animal is minding its own business when it is not minding yours, nobody can really question that. But that takes us back to if you're out there with a service dog in Minnesota and they're just like, oh, you can't be out here with your dog, and they decide to shoot your dog, that's still not justifiable, right? So there's never a situation where your constitutional rights should be suppressed in order for a federal agent to do something else. But to keep yourself safe, you sometimes have to surrender your constitutional rights in order to keep your freedom and sometimes your life so that you can then sue them in a court of law for when they violate those rights. Okay? Because one of the things that at least minorities were taught in low income environments was you have to survive the encounter first before you can get your justice. You are not to debate in the street with somebody who has the authorization to take your life, because they are the executioner. The judge and the jury, you got to survive to get there. Okay? So cooperate to the best of your ability. You can stand on some rights, but the more belligerent the person with the gun gets, the more cooperative you try to be until their supervisor shows up, and you let this work itself out, and then you get you a good lawyer. And sometimes you can represent yourself. If the situation was that egregious, all you got to do is take the video footage and put it into a case file. You can win it on your own. But the situation has to be that you did not perform an incorrect action throughout that, because qualified immunity only kicks in when they were enforcing a law. So if no laws were broken, you committed no crimes, you didn't go to jail for this situation, they did not have anything to accuse you of, and all of your rights are being suppressed in this moment, this is a situation where you have a legitimate lawsuit. Best if I stay home, it doesn't affect you, like Nicole said. But that's one of the reasons why I told you that what we learned in the 90s is that when any type of law enforcement or federal agent comes through the neighborhood, everybody goes inside, stays inside, lock their doors, close their blinds, and don't come outside until you know they're no longer in the neighborhood. And that means that Minnesota should be a ghost town until ICE leaves. And it would make it easier for them to go door to door to whatever place they're going to take people from, collect those people, take them out of the state, and they would be gone from Minnesota a lot faster. The riots slows down their ability to take action, and it slows down their ability to get out of your city. So while you're screaming and yelling and protesting about the fact that they're here, you're blocking their mode of enforcement of their duties, delays them leaving your city, because their 24 hours a day, 365 days a year job is to come and collect certain individuals out of your state. It doesn't matter how long it takes. They don't clock in on Monday and clock out on Tuesday. They will work overnight. They are what you call a salary employee. So if you out there protesting for 18 hours and on a 19th hour you take your ass home, on a 20th hour they're going to get their target. So they can wait. They can wait, because this is their whole job. You're doing this protest on your day off. You're doing this protest on the weekend when you ain't got to work, hoping that you don't go to jail and you can't make it to work on Monday. But this is their whole job. At some point, you got to take your ass to work. And when you do, they're going to go to the address that they were supposed to be going to in a minute and get the person that they came to get. So it is true. They need to stay their ass at home. But this is the reason why the shutdown happened, was because people who got killed should not have gotten killed. House Speaker Mike Johnson had already let the House go home for the weekend when this went down. And he publicly confirmed that there would be no votes until Monday, February 2nd, today, at the earliest. So he knew the January 31st funding deadline was absolute, where if we pushed the bill back to the 30th and the 31st was absolute, and still in all, He knew the Senate was acting, and he knew that without the House there to vote on it, a shutdown wasn't just a risk, but a mathematical certainty. And this wasn't a bug, it was a feature. Sending the House home was a strategic choice to force a shutdown over the weekend and create a pressure cooker. It lets one side blame the other for a crisis that was actually manufactured by simply locking the doors and walking away. They dropped the mic on the situation and walked out of the room. It's a cynical political tactic that uses the livelihoods of federal workers and the stability of government as pawns in a chess game. So the term partial government shutdown is dangerously misleading. It makes it sound like a minor inconvenience hitting a few obscure offices, and that couldn't be more wrong. While it's true that 6 of the 12 major funding bills were already passed for agencies like agriculture, veterans affairs, the 6 that have lapsed are the big ones. So we're talking about the operating budget for the Pentagon, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Labor, and Health and Human Services. The impact isn't just inside the DC Beltway, it ripples across the whole country. So this shutdown freezes new government grants that uh, universities and research labs depend on. Again, it's going to stop critical work at health agencies. Again, it halts federal inspections for everything from workplace safety to food quality. Again, and it directly hits the Treasury and the IRS, which could delay some of the tax refunds that we're about to apply for. Just like I told you. And this is going to be exactly like we've seen in past shutdowns that happened over the December time frame going into the January year, where the government shut down for the first quarter of the upcoming year. It even hurts states that rely on federal money to run their own welfare and support programs. So while the lights might be on at the Department of Agriculture, the machinery that handles national security, infrastructure, and public health is grinding to a halt. So while even though we're going to be using TurboTax to file our taxes, and we're going to put our bank account up there for the direct deposit and get it 2 weeks faster, the 8-week delay, we're not going to get it any faster than mailing it in, because the budget to pay 380 something million Americans just got frozen over the weekend. And tax season started last week Monday, and people have already started filing last week Monday. And anybody who hasn't filed before today is going to have a harder time getting their money if they start filing over the next 2 weeks. And then there's going to be a delay, an ongoing delay to release funds through April 15th. Now, if you're not getting a refund back, this doesn't bother you. If you just have to put your money up and show that you don't owe any taxation through your deductions, this doesn't bother you. But anybody who was looking forward to that refund from the tips, anybody who was looking on the refund from the overtime hours they was putting on last year, that money is going to take a sweet ass time getting to you. They're calling it partial. Is like saying a car with no engine is only partially broken. So for hundreds of thousands of American families, this shutdown is a financial time bomb yet again. An estimated 700,000 federal workers are now facing furloughs again. And I keep saying again because this just happened in October, and they're going to start being sent home tomorrow without pay. And now history shows us that Congress will almost certainly pass a law to give these workers back pay after the shutdown ends, but that doesn't cover it. The fact is that this completely misses the point, because the problem isn't that eventual payment is going to happen. It is the immediate gut-wrenching cash flow crisis that it's going to create. The average federal worker isn't a wealthy political appointee. They are middle-class Americans with mortgages, car payments, and grocery bills that don't care if Congress can't do its job. For family living paycheck to paycheck, especially in a pricey area like Northern Virginia or South Carolina, missing even one check is a disaster. The next critical payday is February 13th. If this shutdown isn't over by then, those paychecks just won't go out. So they're getting this paycheck. But if we don't have a funding source undone over the next 11 days, again, we're in a position where people stop getting paid. And that's going to mean that hundreds of thousands of people will be forced to drain their savings or rack up credit card debt, taking out short-term loans, payday loans, and everything like that to stay afloat. The payback that they get, all that back pay, whenever it comes, will just go to paying off the debt that they took on to survive the second time around. And it's a vicious cycle of financial stress imposed on them by political dysfunction. If you recognize that this happens on a yearly basis, this is one of the reasons why I tell you to build up an emergency fund, to build up a long-term brokerage account that's turning over more than 15% interest per year, so that you've got the money to cover when this starts happening. When you see shutdown happening on the 30th, you should be depositing all your money from your brokerage account into your save to pay your bill. But you should have your bills paid for February and March, so that when the shutdown does happen, because you just seen what happened in October, you had almost 2 whole months down. When you got 2 months worth of back pay, you should have paid your money for the next 2 months and just did an installment plan on whatever you borrowed for the first half, for the first shutdown, so that you would have in January been paying for January and February, and in February you're covering March, so that when this second shutdown happens, you're just paying back whatever you got to pay back on the installment loan you took out in October and building yourself back up from the first time you failed. But now this is a regular occurrence. Once or twice a year, you're guaranteed to, at least under the current regime, to experience a shutdown, because if they don't agree on policies, you don't get paid. Okay, and I believe that putting body cameras on ICE agents and holding them accountable for their behavior is an important thing to discuss, but it shouldn't come at the expense of the federal budget. I personally, matter of fact, I don't understand why they haven't done this yet, but I believe that TSA agents and police officers and whoever else that is in the federal budget that is not part of the debate should be completely separate funding already. It should be completely separate funding already. The military bill, any military exposure, National Guard, ICE agents, feds, the CIA, FBI, all those guys, that should not be intertwined with airport security, in my observation. That should not be on the same level. There should be a different budget for that, so that those people can continue to get paid to keep us from blowing up in airplanes like 9/11, and let them argue their argument on Capitol Hill. If they were going to argue the budget for the Department of Defense, airport traffic control shouldn't be on the Department of Defense's bill. That should be somewhere else. And schools and buses and everything like that, that should be somewhere else. But a government shutdown isn't some abstract political event anymore. It has real, tangible economic impacts that starts at the most local levels. So think about all the small businesses that are surrounding these federal agents and these buildings again, all the military bases and the government facilities all over the country. Yet again, we're talking about the local coffee shops that get morning rushes, the delis that sell hundreds of sandwiches at lunchtime, the dry cleaners, the gas stations, and the small shops. Their entire businesses, here we go again, is built on the daily routines of the federal workers that we're about to lose for the second time in less than 8 months. So when 700,000 workers are suddenly furloughed for the second time around, that economic activity vanishes overnight. The morning coffee rush is gone, the lunch lines disappear, people stop dropping off dry cleaning or filing or filling their tanks for a commute that no longer exists. You're looking at the lack of funding for the government funded daycare center. So now you don't have a place to drop your kids off. And this is going to create a devastating ripple effect. The coffee shop owner has to cut hours. Again, the deli orders less food from the supplier. Again, that's going to impact the farmers. The retail store sales plummet. And these immediate local hits often don't show up in the big national economic data for weeks. You start seeing stock markets plummet on certain businesses that are no longer turning over profits during the shutdown. Shareholders pull out. Some shareholders pull out not because the business is failing. Some shareholders pull out because they have to pay for their own livelihood using their brokerage account. But for the small business owners on the ground, the pain is going to be instant for them. So they are the invisible economic casualties, suffering real losses because their customer base was legislated out of existence. During a shutdown, the government divides its employees into two groups, essential and non-essential. Essential workers like air traffic control, active duty military, and law enforcement have to keep working, often without knowing when they'll get paid again. Non-essential workers are sent home, but deciding who is essential and who isn't is far more political and arbitrary than you might think. So while the main idea is to protect life, property, and national security, the definition can be bent by political leaders to either maximize or minimize public pain, depending on their strategy. More importantly, the label non-essential is a complete misnomer. These aren't people doing pointless jobs. This group includes the scientists on 5-year cancer studies, the auditor checking government contracts for fraud, the historian achieving our nation's archiving our nation's critical documents, and the planner designing our next generation of infrastructure. So their work isn't about an immediate daily crisis, but it is absolutely fundamental to the long-term health and security of the country. So when they foreload, that critical forward-looking work just stops. A multi-year research project can be ruined if everybody is sent home and nobody's there to watch the progress of the product, the science project. A complex financial audit has to be started all over again because a couple months ago, you don't know which category you were on, right? Non-essential is a lie. It's a real non-immediate expectation. And by sending these workers home, we're sacrificing our future for today's political chaos. So one of the biggest myths about a shutdown is that once it's over, everything just snaps back to normal, right? The reality is that the shutdown creates a backlog black hole that can cripple agencies for months or even a whole year. And this is going to be after the money is back on. So the work doesn't just pause, it piles up into an unbeatable mountain, which is why we're going to start having trouble with taxation. So think about small business administration processing loan applications. During a shutdown, those applications are just sitting in a pile. When the agency reopens, the staff has to deal with all of the new applications plus a massive backlog from the shutdown. The same thing happens with passports and visa applications, with federal grant proposals from universities, and with the IRS information requests. This creates a vicious cycle. The backlog slows everything down for everyone. A small business might fail while waiting for a loan. A family could miss a trip waiting for a passport, and a scientific breakthrough might be delayed waiting for a grant. The agency's productivity is shattered, not just during the shutdown, but for the long, long, frustrating slog that it takes to dig out of the hole that was created by the shutdown. So a shutdown that lasts just a few days can create negative consequences that last for years. So since we're still trying to bounce back from the last month and a half shutdown, and now we're looking like we're going to have another 3 week shutdown, it's going to cause a lot more frustration than a lot of people realize. And if you're finding this breakdown useful and you want to stay ahead of the headlines, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and utilize those notification buttons, whether you're watching us from Twitter or Twitch or YouTube Shorts Reel. And for those of you that dive in from TikTok, we're going to be keeping information flooding to you guys every day of the week about the stuff that we find out. Now, we're only halfway through the 15 angles, and the most important part is the 5 money moves that you need to make to protect yourself. That's still going to be coming, but you don't want to miss that. So keep tight, because we've been talking about a lot of stuff today. I told y'all I was going to cover a lot of stuff today. So while Main Street feels the pain right away, Wall Street has a different take. For professional traders, a big and the big investors, short government shutdowns are usually just noise. So the market has seen this move before and generally bets that politicians will come to their senses before any real systemic danger is done. You might see some volatility, but not a panic. However, that calm has a time limit. Wall Street is watching the clock, and that clock is tied directly to the high stakes fight over DHS funding. If this shutdown drags on past a few days and starts looking like a long stalemate over immigration policies, the market's attitude will change very fast. A long shutdown injects a huge dose of uncertainty into the economy, and it signals that the government is fundamentally unstable, and that makes investors very, very nervous. This is the time that everybody starts throwing their money into gold and silver. They'll start to price in that uncertainty, which means selling stocks and moving to safer assets. For the average person, that could mean a sudden drop in their 401k. The longer it's shut down, the bigger the risk, and that is the chaos in Washington that spills over and hits your retirement savings. Anybody who's following me, and you're going to hold off on buying back in when you see the market start to dip, it is going to bounce back, and it might bounce back at 10% increase over the loss. But while it's down, you're buying in heavy so that when it goes back up, you're good. The longer the shutdown lasts, the bigger the risk we're going to have. So to really get why this 2026 shutdown is so dangerous, you have to look back just a few months to the fall of 2025. We're talking about this like a takeover in China. That fiscal year kicked off with a 43-day government shutdown, the longest in U.S. history. That ran from October 1st to November 12th, and that shutdown fought over Affordable Care Act subsidies, was a national trauma. It caused huge economic damage and sparked a massive public backlash. You think that experience would make leaders terrified of ever letting it happen again, but it had the opposite effect. It normalized governing by crisis. It taught the generations of politicians that shutdowns, even recorded breaking ones, are a survivable and therefore viable tool for getting what you want when you're using money to control the argument. The 2025 shutdown basically broke the taboo. Now, instead of being a last resort, a shutdown is just another move in the political playbook. So now we're in a situation where if the parties don't agree, fuck it, I'll shut this bitch down, turn all the lights off, go home and come back until you're willing to agree with me. That's how presidents are going to start acting now. And this is the new shutdown. And it is a direct result of the last one. Since it existed because of the 43-day crisis that provided the guardrails that are now gone, the brinkmanship that once steamed or it actually looked shocking is now very routine, which makes the idea of a long, damaging stalemate not just possible, but terrifyingly probable, meaning that we might see this shutdown last until March 15th. And after every single shutdown, a choir of reforms, policy experts, and frustrated former officials say every single time, never again. They prefer as a simple fix, common sense fix, an automatic continuing resolution, or an auto CR, which is almost like kicking the can down the road. The idea is going to be easy. If Congress fails to pass its funding bill on time, a law would automatically kick in to fund the government at its current level. And this would prevent a shutdown from even happening, but it would make sure federal workers get paid, service continues, and the economy stays stable. It would turn off the crisis machine. So why don't they ever have this happen? The answer is going to be simple and very cynical. Power. The very thing that makes the shutdown so destructive is the chaos, the pressure, and the public pain. The pressure on the politicians that their constituents are suffering is going to pressure them to negotiate. It is also what makes them a very powerful source of political leverage. When the politicians are not negatively impacted by their constituents suffering, they don't negotiate. This side that is willing to risk a shutdown can use that threat to force concessions they could never win through normal lawmaking. An auto CR would take that weapon away. It would force politicians to actually negotiate and compromise rather than holding the country hostage. And for the extremists on both sides who love the chaos, giving up that power is a non-starter. They're not willing to do it. The solution is obvious, but it remains politically impossible for the very people who keep causing the problem. Now, this is one of the most important and overlooked tragedies of every shutdown. While furloughed federal employees face a terrible cash flow crisis, they can reasonably expect to get back pay eventually. Government contractors have no such guarantee. In fact, they almost never get it. There are hundreds of thousands of private sector workers whose jobs are completely dependent on government contracts. They are the IT specialists maintaining agency networks, the janitors cleaning federal buildings, the security guards, and the small engineering firms designing government projects. When the government shuts down, their contracts often get hit with a stop work order and their invoices go unpaid. The work disappears and so does their paycheck. But since they aren't federal employees, there's no system for payback for these people. So for a huge defense contract, this is a manageable problem. But for a small family-owned IT firm with a single contract with the Department of Transportation, a shutdown is a potential death sentence. They have to cover payroll and overhead with no money coming in. They can't even bill for time lost. These contractors and their employees are the silent, forgotten victims, suffering permanent financial losses with no hope of getting back any of it. Government agencies aren't caught completely by surprise by the shutdown. They're required to have detailed contingency plans that outline exactly how they'll operate when funding stops. These plans identify essential functions and the employees needed to perform them. And this might sound responsible, but in reality, it's just another hidden cost of the shutdown. These contingency plans are an exercise in robbing Peter to pay Paul. To keep essential security or safety functions going, an agency often has to pull people from their normal long-term duties. For example, a legal expert who's supposed to be working on a complex case might be reassigned to process emergency paperwork. A scientist might be pulled from their lab to help maintain critical equipment. This means that even within the essential parts of government, the real forward-thinking work is still going to grind to a halt. The contingency plan keeps the lights on, but they do it by cannibalizing the agency's ability to do its core mission. They create a new backlog and new problems, making the eventual recovery even harder and more expensive. They aren't a solution, they're a symptom of the dysfunction. Now, you have to understand this 2026 shutdown isn't really about disagreements over money. It's about using federal budgets as a weapon to force a policy war that couldn't be won any other way. The fight over DHS is a perfect example. This immigration reform that Senate Democrats are demanding, mandatory body cameras, new warrant rules, are policy issues, not budget line items. While these policy issues are for the safety of American citizens that don't respect Democrats, these ideas that would likely struggle to get the 60 votes needed to pass the Senate as a standalone bill are now at the top of discussion. So by tying these policy demands to the must-pass government funding bill, they're changing the fight. The decision by Congress to pass only a 2-week stopgap for DHS while leaving other departments unfunded was a masterstroke of this strategy. It isolates the most explosive issue, which is immigration, and forces a separate high-stakes negotiation on it. It turns the funding of Homeland Security into a proxy battle over the future of American immigration policies. This tactic blurs the lines between governing and hostage taking, and it guarantees that the budget will continue to be a battleground for our most divisive policy fights. So it's always a political issue. In many past shutdowns, the fight was between Congress and the president threatening the veto. That's not what's happening here. In this case, the White House under President Donald Trump is mostly a bystander to the chaos. The Trump administration has publicly urged Congress to pass a deal to fund the government for the rest of the fiscal year. A veto of whatever funding package eventually reaches the president's desk is seen as highly unlikely. The real drama, the real source of the gridlock, is entirely with Congress. It's a fight between the House and the Senate, and more specifically, it's a fight within the House of Republican Conference. Y'all wasn't expecting that. Y'all thought I was about to sit over here and start talking shit about Democrats. With an extremely thin majority, Speaker Mike Johnson has very little room to maneuver. He's caught between the need to pass a bill that can get support from Senate Democrats and the demands of the most conservative members of his own party, who sees in any compromise as a betrayal. Now, this internal conflict, it's what's paralyzing the process. The shutdown is the direct result of the Congress at war with itself, leaving the White House and the American people to watch the damage unfold. So Now that you understand the 15 hidden angles that make this shutdown uniquely dangerous, the political gains, the hidden costs, and the real world pain, the big question is, what can you personally do about it? You can't force Congress to act, but you can absolutely take control of your own financial situation if you didn't follow my instructions from the last time. So you can build a fortress around your family's finances to protect them from this type of chaos, since it's going to be a reoccurring situation every October and every December, or every October and every January. Think about that. So let's get into the 5 critical money moves that you must make right now and start turning this into a practical behavior pattern so that you can bypass this chaos and it not negatively impact your household for years to come. In a crisis, cash is going to be king. The very first thing that you need to do right now is get a crystal clear picture of your liquid assets. And this isn't the time for guesswork. You need to know exactly how much cash you have and where it is. First, let's be clear. Your money in the bank is safe. FDIC and NCUA insurance protects your deposits, and the banking system will keep working regardless of the shutdown. Your debit card will still work. The goal here isn't a bank running scenario. It is to make sure that you have a solid emergency fund that's easy to get to. One of the reasons why we expect you to have accessibility to capital, and this is going to be, I'm going to go into this a little further. You need to have a small stack of cash accessible in your house in case there's no power in places that essentials are needed. Because if the internet goes down, credit card machines don't work. If power fluctuates, but cash registers still manually work, they will take cash, but they don't have the ability to run your credit card. If they can turn the pump on, but they can't run your credit card, you can still pay for gas in cash, but you cannot charge anything to your card if the credit card systems don't function. So you need to primarily have accessibility to some level of cash at your house, preferably in a locked safe that nobody knows about, or very few people know about, because you're going to know about it, your partner might know about it, and if you teach your kids about responsibility, they might know about it. You might do better about having each person in the house have their own safe with their own money in it so that they're not messing with your major safe for the whole family. Whatever. Get that done. Then you have to do something about the stuff in the bank. Yes, I understand anything at the safe, anything in the safe at the house is not gaining interest. That's not important. What's important is that if you don't have power, or if you don't have internet service to function credit cards, you still have cash to buy food and put gas in your car. Okay, there you still have the ability to travel. Think like first 48 hours of um, the apocalypse. And I know a lot of people are like, that's never going to happen. But look at all of these government shutdowns. Just think, if T-Mobile turns off its network and nobody can run their credit card systems, what can you do over the next 72 hours until the power comes back on? Imagine if you were in Louisiana during Hurricane Katrina when they didn't have anything for 90 days. Cash was king. So having cash on hand is important. Okay, you want to do that first, but then bank accounts. So you want to make sure the gold standard is to have 3 to 6 months of whatever your living expenses is. So it doesn't matter if the cost of living is $2,000 a month or if your cost of living is $10,000 a month. You want to have 3 to 6 months worth of money accessible to you. Okay, and this is before you get to your brokerage account, before you get to your 401k Roth IRAs. Okay, facing an immediate threat like this, you want to focus on the next 30 to 60 days worth of money, because primarily they should not go past 60 days with this. But if it does, having that 90 days worth of money is best for you. Ask yourself, do you have enough cash in the checking and savings accounts to cover 2 full months of essential bills? If your income stops tomorrow, where you're not getting paid from anywhere, are you good? If not, figure out how you're going to get there. Maybe that means transferring money from your brokerage account first, because your brokerage account is not going to penalize you for taking money out early, the way canceling out CDs, canceling out 401ks, Roth IRAs, or pulling large quantities of money out of any kind of life insurance policy that you have. Okay. Or the taxation from pulling money out of a health savings account that's not necessarily designed for what you're pulling the money out for. Okay. So first things first is pulling out of your brokerage accounts, and that's going to be why you're going to see a lot of stocks fall, because a lot of people are going to pull from their brokerage accounts because they don't have access to the capital that they need for their standard of living, outside of the people that are pulling out of companies that they invested in because those companies aren't making sales during the shutdown. Now, this is going to be your foundation. Knowing your exact cash position is the first step that makes everything else possible. Don't guess. Open your accounts, do the math, face these numbers. A lot of you can do, using online banking, can do this on your cell phones or your laptop or your tablet or whatever. Get this information down. If you followed the show from last year when the shutdown happened before, you should already have these numbers down, and you should be able to monitor these numbers on some type of spreadsheet to make sure that you're good with your funds throughout any type of shutdown. Once you know your cash position, immediately shift your household's budget into shutdown mode. And this is a defensive move. Don't wait for a missed paycheck to start cutting back. You need to preserve your cash starting today. So get out a piece of paper, open up an Excel spreadsheet or something, and create an specifically designed budget. You want to be ruthless about this budget. The austerity is very important here. Your goal is to separate your wants from your needs. The priority is what planners call the four walls: housing, removing rent and mortgaging; food, which is going to be basic groceries, not restaurants and hanging out with friends and whatnot; utilities, which is going to include your water, your power, your heating, and sometimes your cell phone and internet, if that is what you're using to make money. But if it is not, you don't need it. An essential is going to include transportation to get you to and from work. But if you're not going anywhere, you don't need that either. These four walls must be paid for. Everything else is on the chopping block. So you want to go through the bank statements, find out every reoccurring expense that isn't essential. Streaming services that you barely use, if you didn't cancel them in October, cancel them now. Gym memberships that you thought you were going to use for your New Year's resolution, wait a few months, start it back up later. That daily coffee, the weekly dinners out, gone. The weekend shopping sprees, gone. Ordering shit on Amazon, gone. It doesn't even matter if it was supposed to be broken down to a bunch of monthly payments, gone. In that, stops that. All of it goes down to zero. Every dollar that you save extends your financial runway. So this isn't about a long-term misery. It is about a short-term survival and taking control when things feel out of your control. And if you had this mindset from the beginning, you would have been able to put more money into your brokerage account, where you would have had more money coming out of your brokerage account to offset this type of occurrence, where you could have just took the dividends, deposited them into your bank account, and in February, you'd be paying for March bills with the profits from your brokerage account, and then you wouldn't have to worry about anything. Your whole standard of living will be covered because you're not getting paid from your 9-to-5 job. You're getting paid from your brokerage account. That's a whole different problem or benefit. And one of the other benefits from a brokerage account that is paying dividends, even if the shares fall, as long as you're in a blue chip company that always pays every month, every quarter, every year for the last 25, 30 years, that is not going bankrupt during this shutdown, the value of the shares is not nearly as important as the dividends being paid out from the shares. The dividends are usually guaranteed more often than not. So even if your shares drop 50% during the shutdown and bounce back 75%, doesn't change the fact that the quantity of money you got per share, you're still getting during the shutdown. That's what people don't pay attention to. When I put those stocks across the bottom of the screen to show you guys which ones to invest in, all the dividend paying stocks across the bottom of the screen, if you're looking at a 16:9, but 9 by 16 for those of you that's watching it from the YouTube Shorts reel. So this is maybe the most important proactive step that you can take. And it applies to everyone, not just feds. Everyone who could potentially feel indirect side effects of this. So do not wait until you miss a payment to contact your lender. Get on the phone right now, first thing in the morning, call your mortgage company, call your car lender, call your credit card companies. Matter of fact, you could call and take advantage of the fact that they know that the government shutdown is happening and they started notifying people last week about this, and you could take advantage of any deals that they're going to be offering everybody else for payment options. Don't tell them that you can't pay. Instead, ask simple questions like, with the current government shutdown that we already knew was coming, what kind of hardship or payment assistance programs do you have available for affected customers? And they're going to give you a list of things that they can do for you. Reduce payments. That's not going to reduce the interest rates, but it's going to prevent you from going negative on your scenario during the shutdown so that your credit score isn't damaged by it. If you were part of the first shutdown, they might have offered everyone else back then a one-time $0 payment on one of your months. And since you didn't know and didn't take advantage of it last time, they might offer it this time. There's a lot of stuff that can happen. And take advantage of whatever they got to offer, which after they give you that, you're putting your money together to pay for something else, where you can extend this just a little bit farther. And many lenders now have formal hardship programs because they just had to build this for the last 2 month shutdown. They're expecting the next one to be almost as long, if not longer. So they might let you defer a payment, temporarily cut your interest rates, or waive the late fees. The key is to ask before you're delinquent because they're less willing to cooperate with you while you're in the negative. If you know that your payment is coming, you want to talk to them about it now. Calling when you're in good standings shows that you're a responsible borrower. Calling after you've missed payments marks you as a credit risk. Pay special attention to credit unions. If you remember, they are often a fantastic resource. Many credit unions, especially those with a lot of federal employees like Navy Federal or USAA members, will proactively offer special low interest rates like shutdown loans, right? So if you make that call now, you will be able to get your hands on what you need to cover the spread. And if you get more than what you need, you can use some of the money to make the payments until you get your paycheck in so that you don't fall behind on the loan that you just took out. And then you get your paycheck and put a large majority of it on a loan to pay the loan down. And then you start going back to normal day-to-day operations. But I would strongly recommend that now that we know that we're looking at a 2 month shutdown almost every time that the government is in disarray, that your bills should be paid 90 days in advance. And then your savings accounts are built up after you got cash sitting at your house for emergency funds. And then your brokerage account is built up, 401k, Roth IRA, everything to that effect. Okay? The worst that they can do when you're asking these people is say no. But the information that you get could be a financial lifeline. When cash gets tight, it's incredibly tempting to look at your 401k or your Roth IRA balance as an ATM. This is a trap. Do not do that. Rating your retirement accounts should be your absolute last ditch resort after every other option is gone, meaning that you have completely liquidated your brokerage account before you go to your retirement accounts, and you recognize that after you've liquidated your brokerage accounts, you still need money. That's when you start going there. Pulling money from the brokerage, from your 401ks and your Roth IRAs before retirement age is a financial devastating move. It is a natural disaster for yourself. So first, you'll get slammed with massive tax bills. Then the money you withdraw is usually taxed as ordinary income. And on top of that, you're almost certain to pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty, where you could easily lose 30, 40, or even 50% of your withdrawal to taxes and the penalties, which means that almost everything you've saved plus more is going to end up being lost. But the damage is even worse because you're not just losing the money you take out, you're losing all of the future tax deferred growth that money would have generated for decades. So it's all a permanent setback to your financial security in the future that is not recoverable by just putting the money back. Okay, so before you even think about touching your retirement funds, you must exhaust every other option: the money in the safe at your house, the emergency funds in your savings and checkings accounts, your shutdown budget, your hardship programs, liquidating your brokerage accounts, short-term loans, whatever you got to do, protect your future self from a short-term panic. Okay. Finally, you'll need to understand your specific situation. Base is different from the advice for government contractors. If you're a federal employee, your main challenge is managing a temporary but possibly severe cash flow crisis. Remind yourself that back pay is extremely likely to be approved by Congress, so your job is a bridge of the gap between now and when the money shows up, which this is just like an extended vacation, the second one in almost 8 months. This means aggressively cutting your budget and calling your lenders, just like we discussed. Your goal is to use a little debt as possible to survive that gap. However, if you're a government contractor or work for one, your situation is more dangerous. There is no guarantee of back pay from contractors. The money lost during the stop work order is usually lost forever. So the first thing you must do is get official documentation of your status from your company and the contracting officer. Document every stop work order and every email. If you run a contracting business, you need to have serious conversations about your cash runaway and your ability to make the payroll. This crisis is a brutal reminder that for any business in the government space, having a robust cash cushion is a 3 to 6 months of operation expenses, not considered a luxury, but considered mandatory. This is a non-negotiable cost of doing business with the government. So there you guys have it. This is not a normal government shutdown. It is a manufactured crisis deliberately engineered on the calendar, because I told you in November that it was going to tee off in January on the 30th, and on the 31st, voila, I told you so. So I have been warning you since November 14th, when I covered it on the show, that we're no longer in a shutdown, but let's prepare for the next one. I told you this was going to happen. I marked it on the calendar, and I have been following it this whole time. So this is going to be the direct result of political systems that are broken by years of brinkmanship, which peaked with that historic 43-day shutdown in 2025. And this shutdown is driven by a high-stakes policy war over immigration triggered by a tragic incident in Minnesota. And it's being fought with the federal budget as a weapon yet again. So while headlines focus on DHS, look, and I'm going to tell you one of the most important parts about this argument, this is election year for Congress. Everybody in the office that's fucking up our money this year, y'all got November 23rd, I think it is. Y'all need to be putting in votes to put some fresh blood in the office so that we can stop having this bullshit, right? They're not paying attention because we only vote for the president once every 4 years. But this is midterm elections for the Congress and the House that's fucking up our money in 2026. Put your frustration into your vote, right? Because while the headlines were focused on DHS, the freeze has hit over $1 trillion of funding for our military, health, and infrastructure with the pain felt by the federal workers, contractors, and the local businesses nationwide, and daycare centers all over the place. Yo, baby ain't even got no place to play because they over here fighting over who's going to be in charge of what. But remember, you're not powerless. By taking control of your financial situation, utilizing your vote, you can shield your family from the worst of it, shore up your cash reserves, activate a shutdown budget, call your lenders, protect your retirement accounts at all costs, and know your specific employment status. These 5 moves are your shield and your strategy. Now, what are you most worried about in this shutdown? What steps are you going to take to prepare based on the information that I've given you? Let me know in the comments, whether you're on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, let me know. Your experience could help someone else navigate this crisis just as quickly as I helped you guys navigate it last time. And if you want more breakdowns that give you the real story behind the headlines with actionable advice, not just a bitch fest, make sure that you subscribe and tune in and use the notifications system to remind you when we go live. Because we're here every day of the week and we cover everything that impacts your money, whether it's your ability to make money, save money, invest money, become your own business, trusts, loans, offshore brokerage accounts, offshore trusts, offshore business establishments, visas, international visas, everything under the sun that impacts your ability to make, save, invest money, and live the life that you were destined to live. My goal, by the time you stop watching my show, by the time you stop watching the series of shows that we put up, is that you have a 20-year plan built where you're guaranteed retirement, hopefully before you reach retirement age, where you can stop working, not depend on Social Security disability, and not have to work for another 20, 30, 40 years of your life and enjoy the life that you have. That's my goal. And if you stick with me and you follow my advice, you're more than likely to reach that mark. This is not a get-rich-quick show. This isn't a scheme of any kind. Your 20-year plan is not an overnight scenario. You have to grind, but you have to grind with your future in mind, not YOLO. You have to grind with your future in mind. Even when you're out there dating, your mindset needs to be, am I finding a partner that is going to make my 20-year plan less difficult or more difficult? Is she going to spend more of my money, or is she going to invest in the same things that I'm investing in? Is he going to spend all of his money impressing me, or is he going to invest his money in ways where we're going to be financially stable in the future, where we can quit, our kids can go to college, we don't have to work anymore together? Not I'm living off of him, but we both can quit. That's the mindset that you guys need to be taking in. If you're in your 30s and 40s, you want to set your 20-year plan to retire by 55, 65 years old and stop working until you're 90. You need to decide, how can you afford to make that happen? If you're in your 40s and 50s, you're looking at trying to wrap this up between 65, 70 years old so that you can do another 20, 30 years. Whether your trips around the world while maintaining your stay in America, or you're just going to upgrade to a better standard of living in America and just live humbly. You have to put it in your mindset where you want to be at in the next 20 years and start putting it into action, recognizing that these shutdowns are going to start happening twice a year and probably take 3 months or 4 months out of the year, messing up your money. And you have to factor that into your 20-year plan and set it up in a way where you will not only thrive through the chaos, but you will thrive and not have to work for somebody else for your entire life. It takes men 3/4 of their lives to reach a state of satisfaction. And fellas, we have to make better decisions so that we can get there faster. Now, with that being said, I'm going to say, ladies, as long as the situation doesn't make sense, I'm going to keep asking you ladies to make it make sense. So ladies, please make it make sense. And fellas, I give y'all this information to help y'all become higher value men, because if you pay attention to the things in your life that you are capable of controlling, that you don't like, and change that, then you have more ample opportunity to navigate around the things that are outside of your control. And ladies, while this is a male driven podcast from the male's perspective. You too can take this information and make yourselves higher value women. Like I said, focusing on what your end goal is supposed to be and putting forth the effort to get there. You may come across a partner with the same goals and ambitions, and y'all can work together to get there faster. You can do it on your own, but either way, your end goal is what you need to be focusing on now. Okay? Not living till the weekend, not living for the moment, living for permanent retirement. That's what everybody's goal should be at in 2026 is, how do I get to permanent retirement? Legally, might I add. How do we get to permanent retirement? And if we start changing our decision-making processes, unnecessary spending, unnecessary entertainment, we can start pulling this stuff out of our budget and putting more money towards our permanent retirement. Most families have two incomes, up their standard of living, where both incomes are covering 99% of the expenses. You need to find a way to downsize where your family can live off of one income and take the other income, invest it into a brokerage account with the stocks that's going across the screen, whether it's the top or the bottom, and utilize those accounts where their majority of them are all dividend paying accounts, and you can start building $1 million portfolio within 10 years. 20 years, you'd be at $2 million. There's no reason why two $50,000 a year incomes are still poor after 10 years of being together, outside of wasteful spending. There's no reason why two $75,000 a year incomes are still living from paycheck to paycheck after being together for 10 years. Matter of fact, there's no reason why two $40,000 a year teachers come together and cannot find themselves at $1 million in 10 to 15 years if they're fiscally responsible. So think about that every time a lady says, well, I want a man that makes $100,000 a year. Well, why can't we have a relationship that generates $100,000 budget a year where we put 50% of that away in a brokerage account? Doesn't matter which one of us makes how much. Why are we not working together as a team where we can both retire? Not just you retire on me, we can both retire. Consider that. Now, what we got going on tomorrow, somebody from TikTok was talking to me about white label software and selling that online or selling that somewhere. And I'm going to be trying to cover some of that. And then also, I heard from another buddy of mine about freelance work as a life insurance agent, selling life insurance. I'm not selling any of this stuff. I'm going to give you guys the information about how to get involved in that if that's something you're interested in, and how easy it is to do versus how much money you could make, to determine if that's something that you might want to do as a side hustle. And if there's any investment costs, and if there is, it's not something you want to get into during the shutdown. But if there's any investment costs and that's something that you might want to get into after you bounce back from the shutdown, then that's something to take into. Wednesday, we're going to be talking about South Korea as another place to go, as far as different places to spend money and different places to live more affordably than the United States. And then Thursday through Saturday, we're going to have a lot more discussions about personal development and relationship improvement. So I want to make sure that you guys stay tuned, because on Sunday, we also have questions and comments from the fans. So there's a lot of stuff that we do 7 nights a week, every day of the year, even on the holidays. As long as I got power and I got internet, even when my internet is fluctuating because they're working on the towers right now and I got a lot of drop frames, I still make sure that I come through live every night of the week, no matter what. And we typically start at the close to the top of the hour. We typically kick things off right around the top of the hour, maybe 5 minutes after the hour, and you guys can make sure that you swing back around and come and take a look at what we've got going on. So with that being said, I want to thank you guys for staying for the 3 hours that it took for me to get through all of that information. Thank you for coming to this and that. I'm your host, Xander, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. And I will see you guys tomorrow night.
That's my personal command. I'm not mounted on higher ground where excellence is found. My potential knows no bounds. Raising the bar, breaking ground. I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision, cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield to mediocrity and chaos. I will never I'm not just living, I'm manifesting my vision, cutting through limitations with surgical precision. My expectations are my compass, my respect is my shield to mediocrity and chaos. I will never yield.